Hi everyone, my name is Carl Eppich. I'm a transportation planner with PACS. If you don't know what PACS is, it's the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization. And every large metropolitan area in the country of 50,000 people or more has such a planning organization. And I've been there for about 5 years, and it was 4 years ago, Tex, that we worked on the transit TIF. And I'm really, Nancy left off at a perfect spot. I'm going to really introduce this idea of regional TIFs used for transit throughout, I'm going to say, the southern Maine region, the geography of sustained southern Maine. It's going to be really quick. There's over 40 slides. This is Congress Street. You can see the monument down at the upper left-hand corner. And the point of this slide is that the transit allows a really bustling, active area. This is probably 1935 or so, and I don't think it seems like there's more cars on Congress Street in this picture than there are today, but there's far more people walking around, and more people walking around is more retail, more economic activity downtown. This slide represents the entire rail system, transit system, in 1909. And it goes up to all the way up to Lewiston, all the way south to Old Orchard. It was an extensive rail system, and it existed 100 years ago. Again, here's Monument Square, a number of trolleys, as the streetcars were called, were known as back then, right in front of the, I think it's Lady Liberty, looking east on Commerce Street. This is a modern map of that system. If you haven't seen it, you can easily Google it. It shows that exactly how the routes worked in a kind of a Euro schematic of the system. But the thickest, the areas where the green is thick along Forest Avenue, the red is thick across South Portland, and the blue along Congress Street isn't much different than today, with at least the most heavily used transit corridors in the city. And it extended to Saco, South Portland, Yarmouth, and there was an interurban that went up to Lewiston, and west, even Westbrook. Just a list of the towns that all had transit service. And today, here's where our railway station is in Jetport. Obviously, they didn't exist in those locations, so there wasn't any service. When we did our regional plan 4 years ago in the Gorham East-West corridor study, Charlie Colgan's methods estimated we'd have about 50,000 additional residents in the greater Portland area. The darkest regions are the towns that will grow the fastest, which I think that's Durham up at the top, or Gloucester or something, and it's a percentage, so it's not like suddenly you're going to have transit in Durham. It's just making the point that's going to grow the fastest. This is the cover of our long-range plan, and PACS has recognized economic development as its own policy for about 10 years now, within the realm of responsibilities of PACS has with transportation. And I'm going to make an argument now, not an argument, but kind of a fact, that transit is economic development. In 2003 version of Destination Tomorrow, we PACS did scenario planning. It showed a regional rail system. And remember that rail it was brand new to Portland from the south, and was contemplated for going up to Brunswick, but of course didn't exist. This shows it going on to Rockland. The green in the center and the lower inset talks about a circulator in Portland. And you hear a lot about streetcars, and this is the decade of streetcars. I think there's something like 20-something projects with streetcars in cities across the country. And a little bit of this presentation gets into streetcar economic development, because there is a difference between rail and rubber tires as far as attracting economic development. In 2009, PACS funded a study for the city of Portland that looked at a number of things that support transit, pedestrian, bicycle, streetcars, light rail, and these were just some of the alignments that came up. The one that goes across the top that's dashed is mostly a trail now, at least east of Forest Avenue, but the PTC, you can see in the upper left, is now, as I think it was Greg mentioned earlier, that is solidified as the destination for the major rail investment, and now the train goes actually north, straight north up through Forest Ave to get to Brunswick. But again, this plan conceptualized streetcars and light rail on the peninsula. In 2011, PACS initiated a study, more of an awareness and an engagement exercise with over 120 participants called Moving Greater Portland Towards a Transit-Focused Region. And this looked at problems, goals, and ongoing initiatives for transit. The image in the lower right is a concept of Forest Avenue. The lower left is from the Portland Peninsula Transit Study. But the idea here was, again, Portland used to have a transit system that was quite extensive, and what could come about if we developed a regional transit strategy. We've already heard about Thompson's Point. The yellow there is the rail corridor. It's 105 million. Is that still the number? Right? Roughly 105 million. It includes all the stuff we talked about. My point here is that there's no residential. True TOD is a 24-hour active zone. It's got offices, it's got retail, it has people coming and going 24/7, and there's a hotel here, which is a huge piece of making it more like a true TOD. But true TOD requires people living there. This is a map that shows the different routes. The different routes that are conceptualized for the hub link. Upper left is the Portland Jetport. In the center there, where the yellow meets the blue, is the Thompson's Point. The black, each of these lines is a different route that's going to be evaluated for the hub link project connecting the Ocean Gateway and Ocean Gateway, Metro Pulse, PTC, and the Jetport. And these are areas that could easily be new TIF districts that are all along these routes. And it's really meant for TIFs can serve old and new neighborhoods. It doesn't have to be a greenfield necessarily. It can be an inner city place. And these are images of all examples. The top image there is the Pearl District in Portland, Oregon, which was an old warehouse district, much like our Bayside. And they introduced the streetcar about 10 years ago, and billions of dollars have been invested in the Pearl District now. This image on the lower left, I'll get to it actually a little bit later. That's going to show later. Making it happen in southern Maine. Well, we have a spine of rail now. It goes clear up to Brunswick. There's talk of extending it up to Lewiston, Auburn, and of course on to Rockland. It says the Tatton. It's kind of an old image. The blue that goes off to the right is the old ferry service into Nova Scotia. But the point is that Portland and this area is really a hub of transit. On the left, this is in our Moving Greater Portland Towards the Transit-Focused Region report. Some of the impacts of transit for southern Maine, I'm just going to call out a couple. Improved access to labor and with more diverse skills. Transit is certainly an attractor for innovation workers. More efficient use of short-term parking in existing lots to support retail in town centers. You don't have to commit as much parking to as much land area, scarce land area to parking. You can use transit and really increase densities in those areas to add to the tax base in municipalities throughout the region. Again, transit is not just a transportation tool, it's an economic strategy. And if we can get our heads around that in the region, then I think we could get more communities on board with something as extensive as light rail or even streetcars is not a subsidy, but actually an economic shot in the arm, an economic strategy that's going to move us forward both to activate areas that need to grow, like the compact areas, the pilot projects that we're looking at now, and also to mitigate the congestion that we don't have. I mean, I'm just going to argue right now, we do not have congestion here if you've been to any other city outside of Maine. We don't have congestion, but that doesn't mean we can't avoid it, and we're going to avoid it on the current path. I showed this image earlier. The buildings in the front are before a streetcar stop, and the buildings in the back are after. Quite a bit of difference in density and economic evaluation. These are images from Portland. The one with Campari in upper left is at the run-of-the-mill in Biddeford, which is easily, arguably, a TOD. There's a train station there. There's mixed office, retail, and a number of mills that are converted to residential. Downtown Portland at the Maine Square transit stop. And the lower right is interesting because this is the theater. I think it's called Main Street. No, it's not Main Street Station. It's Freeport Station. And this was built this was built last year, I think, or 2 years ago, prior to the rail down east even arriving. It was funded and they knew it was going to come. But this is the type of thing that a major rail economic, a transit investment can ignite and bring to a community. I just show this because a big part of what I think we can do with transit as an economic development strategy is improve and maintain and preserve our quality places and preserve rural character simultaneously, which is a big piece of the SustainSouthernMaine goals. This is just a quick view of anywhere in America. This could be anywhere around here, although Well, that's my first 10 minutes. I think I can get there, guys. All right, there's my second 10 minutes. This is, we've all seen these places, and a little bit of streetscaping and improved commercial and retail over time. Add some transit, and pretty soon you've got, a community that's much more valuable, much more attractive to be in, far so than that. Who the heck wants to be there? So how is transit funded? I'm going to go into federal, state, and local. This is not exhaustive at all. This image really just shows that the red line at the bottom is federal funding. The green line that goes across the top is state and local. And then there's some markers along the way. But the point of this slide is really to show that in the last 40-odd years or 35 years, the federal dollars have gone up, but not significantly, while at the same time the reliance on state and local revenues for transit has increased dramatically. A lot of different ways that the feds provide money for transit. I'm not going to go into 5303, 5307, et cetera. And what you need to know is that there's formula funds, there's flexible funds, and then there's discretionary funds like Tiger, meaning you have to apply and it's competitive. That's how we get most of our federal funding. State transit funding tools, we have over 20 transit providers in the state, and this is from the 2012-13 capital work plan from Maine DOT. The biennial transit operations work plan provided $28.1 million in funding. Now I looked at this and I thought that was strange because I didn't know the state provided that much money, and then I looked at the breakdown, and 16.3 is operations that's throughput the state from the FTA. 10.7 million within that is from local matching funds, and 1.1 million is from the new START account, State Transit Air Rail account, revenue from a number of sources, and it goes to, it funds a lot of things. Is the point of this. If I got this wrong, somebody speak up with the question and answer. But this is the best I could find on state funding for transit. Local transit funding, so that's been growing, remember. It's an annual budget item. Every municipality does an annual budget. They do a 2-year, 5-year budget. They do a 1-year. Some have capital improvement plans, but the fact of the matter is that how are you supposed to support something that requires a major investment and major operational expenses if it can be cut in any given year? Just this past, I think it was November, Falmouth, had a petition or whatever you want to call it to pull out of Metro, and that was defeated, thankfully. But this can happen any given year. It's always threatened. But sources from local governments, which is not reliable because municipal selectmen and councilors turn over. And especially if you look at it from the long term, it's nearly impossible to expand over given the current fiscal climate. Gorham's got a bus that comes from USM to here. I think it was a year, maybe 2 years ago, Steve was heavily involved with presenting to Gorham and USM this opportunity to go to fixed route service, and it died within the local Gorham government. As many people want to do it, it's still at the whim of the changing of the elected leaders. So what about the regional transit tip? Well, the map on the right shows the geography we did for the moving Greater Portland towards a transit-focused region map. And this is not to exclude the South, but this is just to use this example. And there's a lot of towns within our region that don't have, and cities that don't have transit. So we've got to look at that a little bit. And on the left, this is from the Center for Transit-Oriented Development. The top left, travel and development patterns don't conform to political boundaries. And I think we heard that from Aaron's comment earlier, that South Portland's most heavily used route goes into Portland. It's just a fact. Transit isn't a local municipal, intra-municipal activity. It's regional. We've seen a little bit about the TIF capture. This kind of shows the importance of this slide is that when new transit is announced is when the values actually start to go up, as I mentioned in Freeport. That big investment came in with the Freeport station. And then it kind of flattens out a little bit once it's open because there's this excitement as it builds, and then everything gets locked in. We looked a little bit at this. This is kind of identifying the parcels. This is Rhode Island and what they did for their streetcar. And the left shows the high impact, low impact areas, and the right shows the different types of uses and the different parts of the town, the city where those parcels are. then I go through a bunch of charts here again. This is Rhode Island and in Providence. It kind of just shows in the different neighborhoods what the impact is on new jobs and new residents. This is projected from full build out from their streetcar neighborhoods. Bottom line is square feet of development, again in Rhode Island. The upper one is increase in property values just over time. This is, shows 2015, they assumed that it would open and through 2035, so a 20-year period. And the square feet goes, up significantly, and of course the property value increases. Just one of the tools that's used for understanding what type of revenues will come from the economic investment. This one shows the same thing essentially, but increase in property values. Now, the development impacts of streetcars. This is really interesting because they require tremendous investments. Portland, Oregon is the one that's most well known, but even the small one in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the infrastructure cost was $5.2 million. The development investment along that route has been $150 million, which is a 29-to-1 ratio return on investment. Now, that's probably an outlier. I think the one that's more like what we would see here is Providence, which is a $126 million investment. I don't know if we could ever do anything that big, but they've got $1.1 billion over the route, probably over the 30 years. We've already seen this. How tax increment financing works. This is the specific how Rhode Island would work. Now, PACS is 18 municipalities today. We were 15 until last year. Now we're 18. So how do you get a transit TIF in Maine passed? You do it at the municipal level. So if we wanted to, let's just say we wanted to grow from the current 3 or 4 municipalities, if you just count right here in Portland, 7 I think we have, if you went down to Biddeford, Saco. We need all 7 of those high-functioning municipal governments to pass probably similar transit TIFs that would somehow work together equitably. That's a question to ask. Does that sound like something we can do? Again, in 1392, the LD, we changed the TIF law and it includes expenses and operations. The common elements of viable streetcar cities, and we have a lot of these things: active urban real estate market, or at least the potential for an urban renaissance, great pedestrian-oriented streets or car-oriented streets about to be modified, strong local leadership, that one in your mind, support from other project partners, major businesses, state government, etc. We've had that with Thompson's Point. And a financial commitment from private partners willing to invest. Barriers for success. Can we overcome these? This is the most obvious one. There's a big limit on TIF capture right now. Shauna.
It doesn't apply to transit TIFs.
I pulled this right out of the transit TIF.
It's the same statute for all of them, but yeah.
This is the 2% and 5%?
Yeah, those limits don't apply.
They don't apply. How about the...
And why don't they apply?
Yeah. Because
They surely do.
Well, this is interesting. I must have looked... This came right off the internet. It's been an old document. And the 5%? You see 5% of total TIFs?
It's part of the same, it's accepted as well for downtown and transit TIFs.
It's exempt.
Except,
So those state value,
okay,
increase in
great.
value
So ignore that
locations
one.
are an exemption.
Done, check. The big one in the legislature, at least, is the TIF as a tax shift. It's, if we were to expand, do anything to tweak the TIF legislation, we go back to, was it Senator Owens? The senator from Wells. He is strongly against the TIFs in general, categorically, because they shift, because of the way that it removes taxable properties from the state funding formulas, it shifts some of those expenses off to those communities that don't have transit TIFs. And in some cases, there's no net benefit to those that even do have TIFs in general. And it's a little bit complicated, but I'll defer to the expert here a little bit more on that. So it shelters new commercial investment from the usual tax consequences. This is a little bit more on how that works. So it makes it possible for a community to experience only the flow of new tax money in and not the of reduced aid out. And this is, I think, quoted or from this bit that the senator that's against TIFs talked about. Someone pays when a community retains state aid that should be reduced, and that someone is every other community in the state. In Wong-Speed, it's called tax shift. What's needed for success? Integrated development policies to support higher densities and mixed use and service centers. That was good to hear what Nancy mentioned about where smart goes. I think I have 2 more slides on this. Innovative parking policies, which we're working on in Portland and other places, to encourage transit. Policies to encourage development of vacant land in the transit corridor for higher uses. Wah, wah. Portland's already doing TOD. City and developers working to reduce parking requirements, opportunity to make TOD. Take it to the next level, catalyst for growth, Thompson's point. Municipal support is essential, municipal investment is essential. Connect large employers through areas of redevelopment, and Sustain Southern Maine has been looking at this quite a bit. Next steps for Portland, on purpose. This is an important slide because this is my final slide, I believe. The economic importance of public transit. Transit access is essential to the nation's economic health and prosperity. Helps maintain the vitality of our major cities, simple business districts. And if we're doing it regionally, this would help with even the smaller towns with their small downtowns. Transit connects workers to jobs in suburban and rural areas. Relieves traffic congestion, improves business productivity, and stimulates economic development around stations. And it reduces energy consumption and achieves clean air standards. And some of those examples I gave, it generates significant jobs and a return on investment. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Well, this has been so helpful. We're going to shift right to Shauna and again focus your questions into the breakout sessions. But I would especially encourage you to think about the very last comment in there about tax shift and public perception of burden, and that the kinds of concerns that people will have if this idea were to come out in local town meetings. What are people's problems going to be? And if these are then political obstacles, is this something that people want to organize around in trying to figure out how to address?